Hello, welcome to the 6th Annual Sharon Thesen Lecture. My name is Matt Rager. I'm Associate Professor of Creative Writing here at UBC Okanagan. I want to start with a land acknowledgement to acknowledge that we are on the unceded and ancestral land of the Syilx Okanagan people. And what that means to me tonight, I was thinking about that on my way here. I expect that our lecturer tonight, Michael B. Smith, will have things to say about this. But one of the things that means to me whenever I'm at university is that the land is our first teacher. And everything that we know in some ways comes from the land. And as a university, that's something that we have historically not been great at remembering or acknowledging or doing anything with any substance. And one of the invitations of these acknowledgements is to summon in us the capacity to be curious and to think about that possibility and what we will do with the knowledge that the land is our first teacher. I want to say thank you to a few people before we get started. I want to say thank you very much to Shauna Alderson, who has organized many things here. And one of the things that Shauna is organizing are the photographs for the evening. And this event is, for those of you who are in the room, a public event, but we do not want to take your picture if you do not want to be in the photograph. So if you do not want to be in the in a photograph, it would be helpful if you lifted your hand so that Shauna would know not to take pictures of you. That doesn't. I'm going to leave that to Shauna and Michael to find out. That doesn't mean later you can't change your mind, of course, but it's just helpful at the beginning for Shauna when she's taking photos. Vanessa, who is no longer in our with us in creative studies, has moved on to new things across the country, but who did some of the organizing in advance. To Alex and the Okanagan Library Special Collections crew, who did organize the Zoom and also organized a really lovely exhibit of both Michael's work in particular, some of Sharon's work that belongs in the collection, and also past presenters in the series. Right now, visiting the special collections is by appointment, correct? Yeah. So, but in the coming months, you'll be able to come in here more frequently, and I recommend coming down to have a look at everything that's around here. Also, this is just one of my favorite little spots in the university to come to, and there are many things in the collection that are worth our attention. And I urge you to come here and look at it and have a chance. So here's just a quick plan for tonight. I want to introduce Sharon Thesen and the lecture. And Sharon is here with us tonight and has told me that she said I wrote down 5 words and then showed me a page of words. But I believe her that it's 5 words. But I also, so I will invite Sharon to share that with us in a moment. And then Erin Scott, who is a local artist, writer, performer, PhD candidate at UBC Okanagan, and a former student of both Sharon and Michael's, and a frequent collaborator of Michael's, is going to do an introduction for Michael shortly. And now she's already laughing, so I don't know. She has something that she's going to say. One last thing that I'll remind you again, after Michael's talk, there'll be some time for questions. For those of you who are on Zoom, can you please type your questions and we'll be able to read them out in the room here. So about Sharon. Sharon Thesen was the first full professor in the Department of Creative Studies and now Professor Emerita here at UBC. She's also a renowned Canadian poet and editor. She's published 11 books and chapbooks, including The Good Bacteria, Poema Pink Shale, and The Receiver. Many of us of my generation and Michael's generation, when we read and studied Sharon's work when we were students, so it is quite an honor for us to be able to present this talk in her name, and also to have been colleagues and to have learned alongside Sharon in these last years, which are now like 20 years, but at any rate. In addition to her writing, Sharon has edited 2 editions of the new long poem anthology, 2 editions of Charles Olson's correspondence with book designer Francis Boldera, and a Governor General's Award-winning selection of poems by Phyllis Webb, The Vision Tree. Her most recent publication is Refabulations 2023, which collects and reanimates the longer poems from Thiesen's oeuvre, ranging from her first book published in 1980 to 2023. The Creative Writing Program intends for the Sharon Thesen Lecture to acknowledge her contributions to British Columbian and Canadian literature and to the Creative Writing Program at UBC Okanagan. In her honor, a different writer, artist, or thinker each year gives a lecture that tackles key issues of contemporary writing, poetics, and Canadian literature. To give you a sense of Thesen as a thinker and poet, let me quote from an interview with her that I have quoted before on this occasion, but I like it because it feels to me very Sharon, the Sharon that I know. "I've pledged myself," says Sharon, "to the path of error." And in here, path and error are capitalized. "Since much of my imagination is taken up with mistakes, injuries, illusions, illnesses, temptations, amazements, and feats of strength and mercy such as you find in trapeze artists and nurses. In this way, I'm following our beloved John Keats and his negative capability, the ability to be in doubts, mysteries, and uncertainties, including underlying everything, the mystery of the divine. Poetry is a spiritual second sight, or, as someone I forget who defined it, one last look at the depths." Let's welcome Sharon Thesen.
I have very few words to say about Michael. I'm looking forward to your talk, Michael, and thank you everyone for coming. And again, I'm overwhelmed with the honor of this occasion, and of having been among you as a teacher, as a student, as a friend, all these years, next door to Michael in the hallway. We were in and out of each other's offices. Oh my God. And care for one another's work, care for one another's teaching, and for our students, especially Michael. Michael's relationship with his students has always been very, very encouraging, warm, kind, and helpful. So I think of Michael as a writer of great sensibility and consciousness, a romantic of our time. Well, look at him. For with that comes a sensitivity, a responsiveness, not just to life, but to the persons involved in it. The personal is a difficult terrain because it can collapse into the merely personal, which Michael's work always avoids. For there is a care in his work always for the social and the affective present. And so I admire Michael's work in all of its complexity, and look forward to seeing what he does next. Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's such an honor. Thank you.
Now I get to introduce Aaron Scott to introduce Michael Thesen.
all the writers were like, well, I want to write something. I'd like to write something. And then we all wrote them. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here to, we're not going to do it, we're not going to cry, to introduce Michael and be among all of you. I've been at this institution for a very long time, longer than one should acknowledge, so I won't. But Michael asked Matt, and by extension me, for an intro that was more brief than fulsome, and then proceeded to send over multiple things he wanted us to say, 2 separate links to review, one of which required me to log into my Google account to prove I was over 18. So much for brief. All jokes aside, I'm honored that Matt ditched his duty of introducing Michael onto me, because there really is no one I would love to introduce more. I'll start with what Michael wants me to say, and close with what I want to say about Michael. I'm so scared, he doesn't know. So here goes. Michael is not only a writer, but a filmmaker, a performer, a visual artist, and a really gorgeous drag queen. He founded the Okanagan's favorite cabaret, Pony, of which his drag alter ego, Miss Cookie, is the host. He continues to co-organize this event with Inspired Word Cafe annually, which celebrates its 10th anniversary this March. Michael celebrates 30 years of working at UBC this September. In that time, he was a work-study student, a bookstore clerk, post office dreamboat, library vixen, full professor, and in 2025, the Shirk Researcher of the Year. Michael has published, and we can argue about this later, 8 books. The most recent being his queer anthem soundtrack that offers a gorgeously heartbreaking and victorious account of growing up queer in small-town Cornwall throughout the 1980s AIDS crisis. His full-length feature film, The Floating Man, won laurels across multiple film festivals, both nationally and internationally. So that's the general small scope of Michael as an artist, but now I'm going to give you the inside scoop. Michael is an Aries sun, Cancer moon. He loves ice cream and earrings. He will hug and kiss you until you can't take it, and always has your back. Michael is full of stars. As an artist, Michael's deep understanding of formal gesture allows him to move between genres fluidly, without losing the shape of his center as a storyteller. Michael can weave the beauty with the horrific in a way that allows us to lean closer instead of pulling away. I would say he is, for sure, the second funniest person in this room. As a teacher, Michael is gracious and expectant. He does not allow you to fold in on yourself with self-doubt, but he also challenges you to push further, go deeper, and be more than you ever imagined. In his research life, he leans towards the polemical and does so with just enough humor to sway any resistance. As a friend, he is steadfast and present. I have no doubt that what he will share with all of us today will alter how we see the world, ourselves, and the practice of art making. So it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Michael Thesen.
Hi, everybody. Well, that's all very overwhelming. Thanks for your kind words, Sharon. It is a real honor to be delivering this today. I admire you so much. You have been aspirational in my life, so this is a big deal. I studied your long poem anthology. I did a whole course on it in university. And I wrote my first long poem book this year. Like, it's just kind of trippy that it's all happening. It's like a nice little full circle. So hello, I'm Michael V. Smith. I want to thank Aaron for that intro. That was really lovely. Thanks to the organizing team that brought this all together. Thank you, Matt and Shauna and Joanne and Danya, who worked in the background. Thanks to Alex and her fine colleagues and team in Special Collections. Thanks to all of you for coming to my talk, both in person and those of you who are online. I really appreciate your bodies, wherever they are in the world, giving me attention. I'm going to talk about some hard things today. War and climate collapse and suicidal ideation and homophobia and transphobia, all the good stuff. But my goal is to hold space for these lightly. So we're going to take care of ourselves and each other as the talk unfolds. I've decided to do something that feels radical to me, even a little terrifying, which is to deliver this talk as myself. I've spent a great deal of my early life hiding for self-preservation so that I could grow up, so I could make it to 54. And that hiding is second nature. I don't even notice how much I do it. My name, for example, Michael, I'm not Michael to myself. I've never been Michael. The word is often odd in my mouth. Michael is a public person. He materialized when I started school because that was my legal name in all the documents. At home, I had another name, Mickey, or Mick, which is the name I use when I'm addressing myself. I'm Mick. This isn't an invitation to call me that. People have tried, and it nearly always feels like forced intimacy, someone overstepping. But I mention it here because I'm trying to show up as my best self today. A fuller self, less reduced, less small, less of less. I'm trying to be here in front of you as Mick, the sissy faggot from Cornwall, Ontario, who grew up to be a 2025 Researcher of the Year at this institution. I can't say that without laughing. To show up as my best self, I'm also going to try to speak in my language with the fullness of my expression, including gender expression. I am often reaching back into the past to undo who I had to become in order to survive. And now that I have more agency and resources like this job, and its money, frankly, and writing, and performance, this talk, I can also let more of myself out of its reductive social cage without fear of immediate death. To clarify, for decades, I had to hide my interest in clothes other people didn't think I was allowed to like, and deny my interest in boys or else risk being murdered at the hands of homophobes or murdering myself. That's no exaggeration. I've lived with suicidal ideation most of my life. I think it started around the age of 6 or 7. I remember many nights going to bed and praying to God, where are the other people like me? So what I'm speaking about today has been life or death for me, still is. Mick survives because he is very good at hiding, adapting, code switching, storytelling, improvising. After I decided to give myself permission, one of my great teachers, permission, to be really seen, I realized this could include linguistic permission. I grew up also having to hide the words I knew because my vocabulary as a big reader at a young age made me suspect. Standing out was dangerous. Ironically, as I've moved more and more into middle-class circles, the climax of which was getting this professorship at this institution, I've had to again repress my language, or I felt like I had to, my first language, speaking blue collar, like my mill-working family, which is a language of the machine shop, the garage, the backyard, the fishing boat and bowling alley where I spent much of my time growing up. People say things in my family in a language that doesn't often materialize in books or department meetings. How I speak with my family is somehow not appropriate within these walls. So today, to honor my topic, I'm going to try to not repress my language to also show up in my vocabulary as myself, what we might call local color. Be more embodied, word for word. My talk is about this notion of the embodied word for word. I want to talk about genre, or start there, specifically how genre can explain much of my worldview, which has likely been built more deliberately than most neurotypicals, because so many things I was taught didn't make sense to me. I had to build systems to bypass the nonsense so I could blend in, essentially. I recognize genres, but I don't believe in them. Genre is a made-up thing, but that's okay. Everything in art is a made-up thing. The word thing is a made-up thing. In fact, all of the words in this talk, including their sounds and their meanings, it's all made up. If we went far enough backwards in time, people wouldn't have a foggy fucking clue what language I'm speaking, because we've made it up. But for the sake of argument, let's assume the genre of poetry exists. Let's pretend it's a real thing. Let's pretend if you ask 1,000 poets what poetry is, you'd get the same answer 1,000 times over, right? That's not likely. So part of my talk is fiction. Genre, I argue, is a broad category we choose to believe in based on a collection of qualities. We know a genre by the type of strategies that appear most often. If the work plays with placement and space on the page, it's poetry. If there's a lot of narrative and causality and linearity, maybe a bunch of characters running around, well, that's fiction. If you see a lot of zombies, it's speculative fiction. What is a genre but a system of types? If genre is recognizable, it's because of recurring tropes. Genre is stereotype. When I'm teaching nonfiction, I begin the first class by demonstrating that all the tools are shared between fiction and nonfiction. They're like twins, living in the same house and sharing everything. And I mean everything. Fiction and nonfiction are identical twins with different but similar names. We only know one from the other because of what we label them. Truth or truthiness is so relative and mercurial, it's up to each mother writer to decide this twin is true nonfiction and this twin is make-believe fiction. If you think an objective truth exists, ask your ex to tell the story of why they broke up with you, then her family and your friends and your mother, and you'll understand better how slippery the truth is. Genre. I love asking my students, what's the closest genre to screenwriting? I do it in all my screenwriting classes and sometimes my poetry classes. The most common genre, or the most common guess usually is fiction. People rarely say theater. This year someone said graphic novel, which gave me pause for a while. But in the end, I decided that was wrong too, and I gave compelling arguments. Film and poetry are fuck buddies. Bedfellows for the upper class, fuck buddies for the rest of us who enjoy fucking. Here's my proof. Film and poetry are image-based. A poem is first a thing we read by its shape. It's a visual object. Long lines are slower, narrower poems move faster. As a written form, poetry and screenplays rely more heavily on white space on the page. They both love density or an economy of language. They love an associative leap, often relying on it deeply, leaps of logic and time in film and poetry. They value a very careful reading of everything, more so than in fiction, where your average detail is often just populating the moment. But in film and poetry, everything reads. One object out of place draws the eye, either deliberately or by accident. Everything is hyper-deliberate. They are contained and constrained forms. They are most often deeply reliant on symbol and metaphor. And here's my favorite bit of evidence, which is sexier with a visual aid. Forgot to print out my visual aid. If we're thinking about, oh, it's fine, it's so easy. If we're thinking about a poem as a collection of lines, look at the little magic if we join them up And all we are getting is a little film reel that has been cut up into little pieces. Isn't that fucking delicious? I love that. It's like a stanza unfurling. Well, isn't that just a reel of clips that haven't been joined yet? And ta-da, a stanza is unidentifiable from a montage. A film clip is a poetic line. If we think of the poem as a time-based medium, like a film, the page creates pacing, much like how a camera pans across or lingers on an image. I know, it's a very compelling argument. When I was growing up, not only did I not understand the rules for boys and girls, I didn't understand why there were rules, why there were different rules. Other people seemed to just know what they could and couldn't do, what they could or couldn't be. They seemed fine with being a fireman or a princess for Halloween, but I was always caught not knowing which to choose, wanting to be both, princess fireman, fireman princess. Like, why is everyone being such an asshole about how I move my hands when I talk, or the way my body moves when I walk, what toys I want to play with, who I want to play with? Why does everyone insist on commenting on what I wear? A dress is just fabric to cover our bodies. Men wear tunics in other places in the world. 100 years ago, all babies used to wear the same kind of dresses. There's that famous photograph of Hemingway in a dress as a toddler. When men in Christian churches wear dress-like things, but we have different words for them. Robes. Robe is the same word in French. Get out much? Hello. My relationship to gender then might be bilingual. Gender and genre are the same word in French. My husband says they come from the same the same Latin genus. They're both genre in French. I want to convince you that they are also bedfellows. What we commonly call gender is also a stereotype. What we call a boy and a girl are reductive cliches. I talk a little about this in my feature film, The Floating Man, if you don't mind me plugging my film. Science tells us that there are no such binaries of boy and girl. There are about a dozen different conditions, this medical establishment language, or biological occurrences that will blur the line between male and female, commonly lumped together as the term intersex, which combined are about as common as red hair or twins. Sex designations are a continuum. Shouldn't the rules about clothing be more practical? I could have stood to suffer far less if, like, we had better rules for wearing a gender. Don't wear cotton to go fishing on a cold, wet day, numbnuts. Cotton holds moisture, wear wool. Or everyone needs to know that polyester will reek by lunchtime. Every gender in this room, every gender imaginable, is unique. There is no binary. Gender is a fingerprint. Two people in the same clothes are not the same gender. The same body in different clothes is a different gender. If you think I'm queer recruiting, you're fucking right, I am. I'm inviting you back to yourself. Ask me if heteronormativity recruited me every day of my young life. Binary gender is actually, binary gender zombies tried to eat my brain for decades. It's one of my favorite lines. What right-wingers call recruiting is actually just permission. We're not inviting people into non-binary gender. Non-binary gender is the baseline. Binary gender, and heteronormativity for that matter, are fictions the culture zombies burn into your being. They are a boring story we tell over and over and over until young people literally kill themselves for fear of failing to be this fiction. Ask me how I know. Binary gender isn't just a fiction, it's agitprop, a corruption, social control, brainwashing. So why? Why are we recreating these fictions? I've spent my life puzzling this. I think it's so hard to be a sentient being, to be conscious and self-aware in so much chaos, that we look for calming devices. Language, and with it comes story, which bring comfort. We can explain things going on inside or outside of us. That, I think, is part of it. Most of us hunger for a greater simplicity in the chaos. It's why we crave good sound bites, Coles notes. It's why we elect stupid. Simple can be comforting. We see this in global politics. Binaries are everywhere. Us and them, white people and everybody else, Republicans and liberals, liberals and conservatives. I'm sorry, the NDP lost a lot of ground in the last election. If you'd like a very nice concrete example, just this morning, the Minister of French Language in Quebec, Jean-François Robert, announced a new rule that there would no longer be inclusive language for gender non-binary folks in government communications. It's too hard. He claims inclusive language interferes with kids' ability to learn French. That's an opinion, because there are many, many peer-reviewed studies that show inclusive language actually improves your facility with language. But Robert says French needs to be simpler. This rule applies for all provincial ministries, societies of the state, public organizations, and municipalities. Meanwhile, the Quebec school boards just this week wrote a letter saying they're reeling at the government underfunding, which apparently won't have any impact on learners at all. We see this desire for simplification at play in our relationship to science. Science has built the world around us, our homes, this building, its heat and electricity, and light and the water brought to the taps, our foods even, the elaborate systems that bring coffee to our reusable cups at Comma upstairs, all thanks to science. Our entire social structure is built on the back of science, which now tells us we have passed 7 of the 9 thresholds for planetary ecological collapse. We're all going to die if we continue this course. The science is clear. How we conceive of the world, how we order it, try to control it, is killing everything. So why aren't we running out of here screaming? Why aren't we changing course? Why are we maintaining a status quo? As much as we live in a world built by science, we don't live by principles aligned with research and fact. We live according to other stories. These stories are written by AI these days, bots and algorithms, and news media, social media, et cetera, et cetera. Scientists aren't writing the stories we live by. Capitalists write our stories. Corporations, advertisers, politicians, the people who own the media. Look at all the rise of needles for a classic example, or yesterday's wonderful acetaminophen disaster. Don't take Tylenol, just don't take it. That's my Donald Trump impersonation. If you haven't seen the videos, it's terrific. Kimmel did a really great amalgamation last night. The fucking hubris of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is a lawyer taking the job of Secretary of Health and Human Services and not listening to doctors or scientists. The dominant narrative of capitalism or colonialism is so strong and thorough that it's hard to make even one person change, let alone a government or corporation or monopoly. We only believe in science when it's convenient, like when we're in an airplane. We cherry pick science that helps sell a product of planned obsolescence. We don't change our stories easily, even if they're proven to be false or untruthful or harmful. My work as a writer, filmmaker, and performer have all grown out of this harm. My art lives in the disconnect between what kind of person the dominant stories tell me I'm supposed to be and how I experience the world differently than those cliches. I write about the hardships that we queers experience inside the echo chamber of straight normie cisgender mind control, which claims there is but one cliche, a monoculture of desire, 2 tick boxes for gender, but only 1 if you're writing in French, and spoiler alert, it's masculine. We see this dominant narrative in the white supremacist revisionism and doublespeak of America, and even Canada at large, which operates like it owns unceded territory. Look at Alberta these days for its impressive cornucopia of unresearched claims. It's no surprise to me that gender is a hot button for discrimination because free genders mean free minds. Minds that shed the binary of what it means to be human. Alok V. Menon speaks really eloquently about this. If you want to hear more, you can look up their work. Power loves a monoculture, a singular dominant narrative, what Chimamanda Adichie calls the singular story, because it's a good way to sell products and make money when people are tired and disconnected and just want to be easy for once, because it's so hard to be woke in this chaos making money for our corporate overlords. We see monoculture with Trump sending thugs without due process to disappear Palestinian students, not just off campuses, but off-grid entirely, who are simply telling their stories, stories about genocide and power that rupture the dominant narrative. I had a student, Juliana, back when I first started teaching, who cried with dismay after a workshop saying, "Everybody disagrees with me." She said it just like that. "Everybody disagrees with me." And I told her that was the point of education, especially in liberal arts. Universities are sites of difference. Knowledge and opinion are a vast map. So it is only in conversation with each other that we find out more of what's on the map and where we place in relationship to each other, to any of the details on the map. Where we are similar and different both. That's what we nurtured. That's my ideal anyhow. We see a dominant narrative clearly at home too in our beloved UBC, where I've worked for 35 years as of last Friday, or 30 years as of last Friday, whose mission statement claims to be inspiring people, ideas and actions for a better world to foster global citizenship and advance a sustainable and just society across British Columbia, Canada, and the world. And whose own stated integrity is a moral value, the quality of being honest, ethical, and truthful. But our own students from Palestine were starving themselves on this campus, literally, just to have their stories heard about their families being slaughtered, begging administrators to listen to their inconvenient truths, asking us to divest from the war machine. The UN has declared Israel's actions a genocide, but UBC has yet to divest. But hey, my pension is doing great. It's up 12% over the last 5 years. Monocultures may kill other people, but they're lucrative for some of us. Science also knows that monoculture is a death march. All systems in nature are systems. They are complex, interconnected, multimodal, robust. Nature is diversity. Duh. Paul Hawken, in his really lovely book, Blessed Unrest, speaks about this. And the New York Times gives us a nice précis saying that Hawken, quote, attempts to link the environment to issues of social justice and even culture. The death of languages, for example, is tantamount to a blow against human diversity. Diversity being the engine of a species' biology and, in turn, our ecosystem's health. Squashing trans rights is the extinction of species, including our own, which provides some insight into why my colleagues, Astrida Neymanis, Aaron Scott, and I are working on an idea we call the biodiversity of gender. Contemporary science is puzzling the quantum measurement problem. To measure is to reduce, to impose a fixed state. And all measurement is distortion. Across all life, fixed states are death. So I'll acknowledge that language is also a kind of imposed measurement. This is not that, albeit less static. Michael, you're probably saying, not language too, you're being such a downer. What will save us? What can we do? Poetry. Poetry is our knight in genderqueer armor, particularly metaphor. I'm obsessed with the gap between things. So I want to unpack a few ideas to explain how any reductive linguistic system of naming might also offer us hope and tools to survive. Let's start with something really basic, though. Let's start with the word human, and we'll add a dash of science to that. Estimates assess the typical adult human body to contain about 30 trillion human cells and about 38 trillion bacteria. 8 trillion more cells than our own live in our bodies. This microbiome process, they process nutrients essential for our survival that we couldn't process without them. We host so many creatures we can't live without that it seems stupid to think we're separate. To separate would be death to us and them. This spring, I heard a scientist on CBC's Quirks and Quarks talk about how our gut biome operates like a second brain, sending signals back and forth through the body to the brain and other parts of the body that the body responds to. In fact, gut microbiota may help shape our very thoughts and behavior, as scientists are now seeing that the microbiome can even alter affect feelings of anxiety or aggression. If 26% more cells in our body are bacteria than human cells being so much larger, of course, so we look like ourselves, and we can't live without them, how do we understand ourselves as singular? For that matter, we have to breathe to live, eat food to live, drink water that makes up between 40 to 70% of our bodies to live, and so are the air and land and water not also our body? We see lots of this kind of kinship mirrored in Indigenous teachings and worldviews, right? So how does our concept of self have to change to hold the reality that we are porous with our environment, that each of us is an environment? One of my favorite writers, John Berger, wrote a fun essay called A Load of Shit. It's literally about shit. He's digging a hole in his backyard to bury a year's worth of shit. But it's also about political hypocrisy and doublespeak and evasion, not calling a thing what it is. In today's political climate, I think of all the talk of Israel's right to defend itself. In international law, Israel is an occupying power. An occupying power cannot justify military force as self-defense in territory for which it is responsible as the occupant. Its defensive measures can neither take the form of warfare nor be justified as self-defense in international law. And yet, how many times have you heard that phrase on the news? Shit is shit. Why call it something else? When we see a pile of shit in real life or coming out of the mouth of an orange man, we should call it what it is. Our notion of human as singular, separate, not nature, not animal, not many creatures, not a walking, talking host planet to 38 million beings we couldn't live without, that tired cliche of what it means to be a pristine human is a pile of shit. We are nowhere near accurate in naming what we are. Okay, I know. What the fuck am I going on about? What's this have to do with writing? How did we get here, Michael? I'm going to take just one more small little linguistic theory heady moment for another 90 seconds. So I want you to stay with me. And then I'm going to get to my favorite part of the talk, coming back to art and poetry before I wrap up. In my second year, I took a linguistics class in my undergrad, and I studied Saussure and Lacan and the theory about the signified and the signifier. Maybe you know a little bit about this, which has had a lasting impact on my sense of the world. Here's a tiny, quick breakdown. A signifier is a word, like dog or chihuahua, which refers to a signified that isn't the thing itself, not the actual chihuahua. The dog is just a dog, it's being over there snoring in the corner. But as lacanonline.com explains, the signified is not the thing or object in reality to which the signifier refers, but instead the meaning. Lacan says that it is only through the production of more signifiers that you can designate meaning and thereby produce the signified. It is only through signifiers that the generation of any meaning or any signified is possible. For example, when you look up a word in a dictionary, chihuahua, you do not find the object itself, but other signifiers or words that you use to ascertain its meaning. These words or signifiers in every case refer to more signifiers, which in turn refer to still more and onwards forever. The meaning is never fixed and localized. Fun fact, if you look up the definition of human in a Merriam-Webster dictionary, we're a bipedal primate mammal, Homo sapiens, a person. And if you look up person, it's human, individual. And if you look up individual, you get an indivisible entity. Meaning is lube, man. Slippery. I talk about this interdependence of language and meaning when I'm teaching. Everything you include is also everything you leave out. I always say every playing card in a deck of 52 is also every card that it isn't, because they are part of a system. If you lose one card, your game is ruined, or you at least have to adapt. This Saussure-Lacanian theory of the signified and signifier did me a world of good. I saw myself as belonging in the world a little more. It's not like I started living within Lacanian theory, but I saw the usefulness of this system that spoke to interdependence, to shifting knowledge. The notion that meaning is a collective and relational enterprise felt very productive for me, very true. It reminded me of money, which is a fictional made-up thing we all use, but relies on a common understanding or agreement. The value of money is held only in a kind of relational trust. It reminds me of gender. Gender is a collective and relational enterprise. A nation, all nations, are a collective and relational enterprise. This institution, UBCO, is a relational enterprise. And all of that complex mess of making shit up, brings me to my title, again, the embodied word for word. Recognizing the world as we know it is a thing we make, that there are people involved. There are people behind these systems, impacted by these systems, dying to maintain these systems despite people dying within them. That there are agreements which can be edited or changed. That none of this, language, money, nations, institutions, gender, none come from the ether. They are made. They are fictions we believe in, so they can be fictions we choose not to believe in. As I see the end of this talk approaching, I want to bring this back to writing so that you think I did Sharon a good service talking about writing. I work across many genres, but it's poetry that feels the most productive, or the tools most commonly found in poetry, not the genre itself, which I recognize but don't believe in. Poetry's tools, the most common ones, those also help shape the world for me. I want to start with gaps. In poetry, we call it an associative leap. I love teaching about the gaps in writing. Our great film guru, Robert McKee, says that story exists in the gaps between what we expect to happen and what does happen. Because in that gap lies surprise, which generates curiosity. Why'd they do that? In answering the question, we gain insight. So a gap is a generator for new knowledge, basically for empathy. I love teaching about space on the page or silence in performance, any leap really, be that a leap in a story's timeline or a leap between topics or images, and how each audience member or reader pours their own experience into that gap. We imagine into the space what's missing and feel a kind of immediacy by using our guesswork to make it make sense. The writer's leaps being the place in which we invite the audience to make it up with us. Not knowing being a means to know. Any deliberate silence holds the potential for insight, really. We might ask, why would administrators refuse to speak to protesters of genocide? What could account for their silence on a topic so life-threatening if we are indeed living by UBC's mission of accountability, which they state as a personal and public value, being responsible for our conduct and actions and delivering upon our respective and reciprocal commitments? How does silence feed the commitment to students? what other commitments might they be accountable to then? What's written is also what's not written. What's said is also what isn't said. We imagine into the silences or gaps, making something out of nothing, which doesn't always feel like nothing, does it? Gaps are also instrumental in making metaphor. Metaphor shows us the space between two things being compared, its vehicle and tenor. Trump is a rotting cheesy. Metaphor is relational. Relationality is metaphor's baseline. Metaphor doesn't just hold complexity, it helps us to understand complex thoughts through smaller, tidier packaging, the cheesy. Yes, metaphor might be thought of as reductive by making a tidy container, but it's like a zip drive. It expands. In a productive metaphor, we know more about the things being compared. I can say, my body is a planet, more than an island inhabited only by me. My sense of the body, this pluralistic entity I call a self, is now an environment. Each of us is inhabited, a biodiverse habitat. We are not the inaccurate cliche of the body as a singular thing, separate from environments inside or outside. We are each a microclimate within a macroclimate. Metaphor can help us hold this new sense of self and new and more accurate understanding for human. Metaphor kind of merges its tenor and vehicle. It conflates categories we usually think of as separate. Through comparison, metaphor makes the familiar unfamiliar so that we might see both sides better, even as they blur. I'm deeply interested in the conflation of categories, the blurring of genders and genres, and inside, outside, us, them, and. My new book, Soundtrack, is an exercise in working between genres. It's a poetry book because it uses space on the page and line breaks, but it's also memoir. CBC very nicely put it in their nonfiction books to read this fall. But by my mind, it's really a script for a spoken word performance. Each poem sounds like a story when I perform it, and is telling a story about coming out during the rise of AIDS, not also oral history. So it walks between genres. Metaphor blurs the boundaries. It invites us to know better. And, be honest, is metaphor, which relies on the space between two things, not a nice metaphor for the distance between two minds, or bodies, two nations? All new knowledge that's produced when we try to reconcile the distance between two distinct and unique entities. When we come together to compare perspectives, when one person talks and one listens, is that not metaphor? Or at least its twin. My final quality we often find through poetry, or all writing really, but more acutely in poetry, is that of nuance. The poetic tool of nuance and complexity, where art isn't trying to give you a singular story, a fixed answer, but a more robust inquiry to know more deeply without knowing everything. Nuance is humility. I think nuance in poetry is a step back towards a world less divided up by language and its categories. Art makes the world messy and connected again. I love the poetic and for this reason, the poetic and where all the interpretations of a poem are accurate. Some might be more robust or precise, but all the meanings are legitimate, even if they contradict each other, so that the thorough meaning of a poem is also relational, cumulative, and embodying nuance. Our greatest tool isn't in the definite, the monoculture, the fixed position, the blunt force of a dominant narrative, the binary, the black and white, which are all tools of authoritarianism. We live and thrive through diversity and the spectrum, which requires humility, nuance, not knowing, and curiosity, which are all fuck buddies of relational knowledge and the parents of empathy. I am still living through a hate-mongering war of ideas about a genderqueer experience I live versus a heteronormative cisgender Goliath trying to choke me and my story out of existence. I imagine I'm going to spend my life undoing its knot of lies, and I would invite you to join me. What I, Mick, planet Michael V. Smith, and its 3 billion inhabitants, can offer you is this collection of tools we call poetry. My nuanced friend, my teacher, my permission, my pen, my shovel for all that shit. Thank you.